No activity is more spiritual than any other activity. Or any less spiritual. Watching a football match and meditating. Chanting sacred mantras, dancing on nightclub. Something simple that you enjoy doing and do it. Find something simple, easy that you enjoy doing and do it.
But is there not still, I mean, myself it seems as if there is a much deeper layer, if you can call it like that, an enormous exhaustion in that sense, because of the constant investment which is going on.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and if that's going on, and I mean, if there are deeper things and there are more problems going on, and if the person is drawn to it rather than wanting to say fuck off to it, then there's therapy, and there's meditation, and there's body work. If the person is drawn to it, that can all be, it may be beneficial, but nevertheless, in the end, we're left with there is justice. If there is something simple we enjoy doing, we might as well do it. Because it's as meaningful and as meaningless as everything else. So I think I've already mentioned, my next book is called Drink Tea and Cake. It doesn't have to be drinking tea and eating cake. It's a metaphor. Do find something simple you enjoy. Because if the person drops away, and this is seen for what it is, that's what you're looking for. That's what you will be left with. That's what will be left with anyway. Just the simplicity of this, in which maybe some of the time something simple is enjoyed. It's not very good advice, but then no advice is very good. If it were possible to give advice, it would be relax, find something simple to enjoy and do it. It's ridiculous. Who is there who can relax? No one. But I don't know whether to say it's as good as anything else or it's no worse than anything else. And it's irrelevant. It makes sense to the mind because if the mind gets the idea that there is no one, it hears a teaching or it reads a book, the mind does, that there is no one, right? It seems to make sense for the mind then to examine all the different layers of the person one by one in order to discover that that is not what the person is. I mean, it seems perfectly logical. So, to the mind it makes sense to ask myself, am I my thoughts? Obviously I'm not my thoughts because my thoughts are constantly changing and yet there is this sense of a person here. Am I my body? Of course not. This body has changed enormously since I was 5 years old. It's not the same body. It's probably not a single cell in the body that's the same as when I was 5 years old. And yet there's this sense of identity. Am I my feelings? Of course not. My feelings may be constantly changing. Maybe not constantly, but certainly changing. I feel happy, I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel jealous. There's still this sense of identity. So it makes perfect sense to the mind to self-inquire, to look at these various levels of what a person may be. The idea is that by looking at each level, I discover that that is not who I am, and I peel that level away. And then I get to a deeper level. And I examine that, and I discover but that is not who I am, and I feel that way. And when I have worked through all these false levels of what the self is, I will be left eventually, when I have peeled away the last false idea of what the person is, I will be left with the truth, a word which we should be extremely cautious of. I will be left with the truth that I am no one. And, as we were talking before, I am everything. In being nothing, I am also everything. There's only one problem with this. It's a person who's doing the self-inquiry. So it is completely and utterly futile. Because what you start off with is a person who thinks they're somebody, and what you end up with is a person who knows they're nobody, but they're still a person. So what difference does it make?
Entertainment between birth and death.
Like everything else.
Like everything else.
Like everything else. A bit of time structuring. For a person, there is an existential problem. We are born and then we die. And by and large, these two events tend to take care of themselves. We don't tend to have to do anything about them. But in between, as the existentialists notice, there is this thing called time. And time has to be filled. Time has to be structured in some way. And self-inquiry is one way of structuring it, not a very entertaining way. There are much more entertaining ways of structuring time, being a Formula One motor racing driver, for example, or founding a religion, or becoming the pope of a religion that already exists, or making lots of money, or having lots of lovers. All of these are probably much more entertaining ways of structuring time and self-inquiring, and none of them have any more or any less meaning than any of the others. This is an existential problem. An existential problem can only happen for a person. If the person's seen through, no more problem. No more problem with structuring time, because see, there is no time to structure. There's just this. And this is perfectly capable of unfolding on its own without any need for anyone to structure it.
Richard?
People use language in a different way.
Yeah.
I would tend to use identity, I would tend to associate it with that sense of person, which comes from separation. So, I mean, again, it's just my choice of words, it doesn't matter. But sometimes, if I use the word person, I usually mean the sense of separation, right? If I use the word character or individual, I usually mean what's left, if you like, when the sense of separation is gone. Because what's left is a set of characteristics, so we can talk about a character. Otherwise, we may start falling into another spiritual story that, what's left is something very bland, very accepting, very lovely. The impossibility of negative feelings, no preferences. I don't mind that I have tea or coffee. Forget that. If we sort of say, well, there's a character left. Well, a character has characteristics, preferences, likes, dislikes. There's no reason why any of that should change.
You feel it stays a feeling Richard and not a feeling tree. Huh?
Yes, this knows that it's Richard
and not a
tree in one sense, and yet it is seen that tree and Richard are the same. Yes. And language is very tricky here. Let me just go for it and say, there are what we could call liberation events. These are often described by different individuals, different characters, right? And sometimes in what we could call a liberation event, there is a total loss of any sense of physical physical localization. So it's a complete loss that somehow, awareness resides here in the physical body. There is a total awareness, bad languages, but never mind. There is a total sense or knowing or realization that being, oneness, consciousness, awareness, whatever we want to call it, is undifferentiatedly everywhere. And that word everywhere no longer makes any sense, because if it is the same here as there, then there is no here and there. And there is nothing in between here and there, because that is also the same. So there is a total loss of any sense of localization. Nevertheless, there is still a knowing that this is a Richard and not a tree, or this is a Peter and not a tree, or this is a Nathan and not a tree. We managed to structure time for the whole 4 hours. Okay, we will bring this to a close then. So, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
For being here.
Arunachala.
Thank you. And I spent some time long ago at Kaneshwari, Ananda's ashram, and there was a mountain there. Not a very distinguished mountain, a very small mountain, because there were all sorts of spiritual stories about that and so forth. Again, that's very understandable. We want to be special and different, so we want to be with people who are special and different. With a guru, we want them not just to be a guru, but to be an avatar, or if possible, the avatar, yes. Because that then makes me special and different. We want to be in special and different places, so we go to places and we make them special and different. Of course, nowhere is any more sacred than anywhere else. This is the most sacred place we could be.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that? Thank God. And if some of us go to the Italian restaurant tonight, that will be the most sacred place we could possibly be. And if you go dancing in a nightclub in the early hours of the morning, that will still be the most sacred place it could possibly be. Nowhere is more sacred than this. Yeah, but here comes the but. There's always a but.
Well, yeah, always a but. But I mean, as far as the person